Good afternoon and welcome to Do You See What I See? I'm Yolanda Nava. Today's guest is a writer's writer, a New York Times bestselling author, Lisa See. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you, Yolanda, so much for having me.
Well, I'm delighted to have this and I'm so happy to talk with you. I first of all want to congratulate you on your many awards and especially the Woman of the Year award that you received from the National Association of Chinese American Women. That's always wonderful to be acknowledged and honored by your own group.
It
And
is. I mean, but
yes,
there are so many different kinds of honors, and some that seem really big are less important than sometimes the ones that are very small, that only have meaning, but really only have meaning to me.
mhm. Yeah, I've always enjoyed those more intimate acknowledgments. It's nice
Hmm.
to have that connection and that wonderful base that you've had all these years. I love your book, Lady Tang's Circle of Women. So let's start with that. And I'm curious to know what inspired you to write that book?
Yeah, so actually, I think the thing to know is that I usually think about books for a very long time before I decide this is the one. With my last book, Island of Sea Women, it was 8 years. With Tea Girl of Hummingbird Lane, it was 20 years. The one I'm just finishing up right now, I had it in the back of my mind for about 30 years.
Wow.
But this was completely different. And you kind of have to scroll back in time, I guess now about 5 years.
Mhm.
And I had just gone out on book tour for the paperback of The Island of Sea Women. I was thinking about what the next book was going to be. I was supposed to be out on tour for 6 weeks. I left on March 10th, 2020. And so I went to 5 states in 5 days, and then the tour was canceled. I was sent home, the country shut down, and of course, the world shut down.
Right.
And remember, we all thought it was going to be 2 weeks. Turned
Yes.
out not to be that way.
A few years.
And you would think that this would be a great opportunity for a writer. You're not going anywhere, you're just holed up. But I do so much research for my books. And all the libraries were closed, all the research libraries closed, all the archives closed, and
Yeah.
of course China was closed, so I couldn't go there to do work. And I all of a sudden I had nothing to do. I mean, I really nothing to do. And here I was, home alone with my husband 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and with nothing to do. And I did clean out a closet or two, but that didn't take too long. And so I was really at loose ends. And I have to say, or admit, I didn't handle that time very well. I was really just, I mean, we have to think back when there were no vaccines on the horizon. We didn't know what was going to
Right.
happen. Was this how life was going to be forever? And like I said, I didn't handle it very well, and I was really moping around. And I don't mean to sound melodramatic, but there was a part of me that just felt like, well, I guess my life is over. My life as I know it is over, and I guess I can't do what I do. I can't do the thing that I love. And so I was moping around the house for a lot of months, and it wasn't until October of 2020, so a lot of months had gone by,
Yes.
that I was walking by the bookshelves in my office here, and the spine of one of the books jumped out at me, and I really don't know why. A gray jacket with slightly darker gray lettering, but it was like this book flew off the shelf and into my hands. Reproducing Women, Pregnancy and Childbirth in the Ming Dynasty. And I
Wow.
thought to myself, well, here we are in the middle of a pandemic. My life is over. I might as well sit down right now and start to read it. And I got to page 19, and there was a mention of a woman doctor who, in the Ming Dynasty, so 500 years ago,
Yes.
had published a book of her medical cases. And I thought, that's kind of interesting. I set the book down. I came over to my computer and looked her up and discovered that her book was still in print, not just in Chinese, but also in English. And so I am a huge supporter of independent bookstores. However, on that day, I may have ordered from Amazon. And I had the book within 24 hours. And so instead of thinking about this for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, it was all of about 26 hours.
And that was just one of those intuitive moments. Have you had many of those? I mean, do you find yourself, apart from your diligence at research, do you find that you're all of a sudden some idea pops into your head, you
Absolutely.
dream?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I mentioned earlier Tea Girl of Hummingbird Lane that I'd been thinking about for 20 years. So that book has at its heart, I mean, I had wanted for a long time to write something about China's one child policy and adoption from China. But I just didn't have my way in. And there was this one night, my husband and I were going to the movies. We were in Santa Monica, just crossing the street. And I saw up ahead of us in the crosswalk an older white couple walking with their adopted teenage Chinese daughter between them.
Oh.
And she had a long ponytail. And I had this kind of vision of her as being like a fox spirit in her family. In
Mhm.
Chinese tradition, fox spirits can be very naughty, they can be quite mischievous. Um, but in their best moments, fox spirits have this ability to bring great love and to create families.
Mm.
And so, when I saw this kind of foxtail swishing back and forth ahead of me, I thought, well, she really is like a fox spirit in her family, in the sense that through her presence, she had brought great love and had helped to create a family. And so, truly, from one side of the street to the other, I knew what the next book was going to be, and I had my way in.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I did my first book, It's All in the Frijoles, I would go to the Pasadena Central Library to do research. I'm
Mm-hmm.
an expert on Latin American literature or poetry. And so I went to the library, and what I found happened is I would be reaching, I'd have the numbers, the numbers on the back of the book, that you're supposed to research. And I was reaching up to look for a book, with the right numerical, numbers, and a book fell out of the bookshelf and landed almost on my foot, but thankfully it didn't hit my foot. But it opened to a page. And when I looked at the page, it was exactly what I was looking for in the
Okay.
chapter I was working on.
Yeah, I think these things happen, and I don't know what it is. I think sometimes I think it's just that all of a sudden we're kind of open and it's like we have a little antenna up. And that as soon as we're open for something, the universe kind of brings it to us.
Yes, yes. I really loved your Lady Tang's Circle of Women, and I think the subject of woman's healing medicine, of herbal medicine, at a time, especially in the 1500s. Of course, the Chinese were in the Americas in what was it, 1434 or something? There's a book by that title. But and there was a tremendous influence, by the way, of Chinese in Mexico and Latin America.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's fascinating, and there's a great deal of similarities between our cultural roots. The virtues that are extolled in the Chinese culture are very similar to the virtues that are extolled in the Mexican and Spanish speaking culture.
Hmm.
And so I felt that, and I can see that, and it's very empowering. The what can we learn from your book about the about Chinese medicine, about women's health, that we can bring into our everyday experiences here in the US?
Yeah, so Tanya Shen, this woman doctor 500 years ago, all of her patients were women and girls. And at that time, male doctors couldn't see their female patients. They
Right.
couldn't be in the same room with them. They had to be behind a curtain or a screen, or better yet, in the hallway. They couldn't touch them. They couldn't smell them. They couldn't directly ask questions. And so she was able to do that. And I, you know, she was really looking at women and girls, their health, and especially their reproductive health, in a way that male doctors just simply couldn't at that time. And one of the things that struck me as I was writing the book is that it doesn't matter. Well, there are two things really. One, it doesn't matter whether you lived 500 years ago or right now today or 500 years from now. It doesn't matter where in the world you live or what your circumstances are. That as women, we are connected across time and space and geography by our unique um, physiology and biology.
Yes.
And that it doesn't matter, in the novel, you have people at the very lowest part of society, servants, all the way up to the empress. And it doesn't matter whether you're, in that time, a servant or the empress. If you have a baby inside, there are only a couple of ways our kid's going to come out, right? And so that was one thing that I was thinking about, and how that is a universal, for women's bodies, that we all share this. Particular physiology. The other is who has control over women's bodies.
Yes.
And I'm sure they were arguing about this in caveman days. They were clearly arguing about it during, 500 years ago. We're still arguing about it today. And I suspect in, 500 years when we're all living on Mars, they're going to still be arguing about it.
Well, it's rather frightening what we've gone through. I mean, you might expect 500 years ago to have, foot binding and have some of these other practices, but we've moved so far forward in the last century. And then to have things move back, not only
Yes,
50 years, but up almost 200 years,
right.
is astounding.
Yeah. I mean,
And
I had finished the book and was just doing the copy editing. So, the book, as you know, is like done. At that point, you're just dealing with little things. Was when the Dobbs decision came down. So that didn't, I wasn't thinking about
yes,
the overturning of Roe v. Wade. But that did happen, once as the book was being completed. And I see that as a big setback. But the other thing, Yolanda, is a couple of months ago, I went to an event hosted by Human Rights Watch. And it wasn't a fundraiser, it was just kind of an information session about where things are for women in Afghanistan and the United States.
oh,
Well, obviously, we know things are really bad for women in Afghanistan, and we've had some setbacks here. I mean, obviously, not at the same level, right? But during that conversation, they talked about a new UN study that was looking at when women around the world will achieve true equity. And I'm very sorry to say, now I have that report. I'm very sorry to say that the UN doesn't anticipate true equity for women around the world for 300 more years.
wow.
Yeah.
That is distressing.
Yeah. And I think, I just think if we look at some other countries, that we see in the news, right, like Syria right now, which is we're seeing on TV or reading about or hearing about in the news, life for women there is they're completely covered and have very limited opportunities.
It is that there's so much difference in class and in different countries, extremes, even within the same countries. There aren't the same
Right.
opportunities for low income people in this country as there are for middle class or more
Obviously,
affluent
yes,
people.
you're right.
And there's much yet to be done, to envision that which we want to see happen, to have the empowerment that those women healers in 500 years ago were generating. It was amazing what they were able to do because the
Hmm.
male doctors, like you say, they couldn't get close enough to even understand what was going on if they could even fathom it. And we have these waves of forward and backward. But what's so distressing is that we've never experienced this degree of it in our lifetime.
Right.
It's been
Exactly.
there before. It was there present in the 30s. And certainly when Hitler was coming into power in Germany, there were
Right.
many here within the highest echelons of society, including Congress back in the 30s, that were supportive of fascism.
Yeah.
So it's interesting how these movements evolve. I'm curious to know, though, you are, intuitively attracted to certain themes, by running into something or, having that experience when you're driving across the street or driving through an intersection. What is your practice, your daily writing practice? You said you didn't do it during COVID, but what typically is your
Well, I
writing?
did. I did once I had this project, but it was just that original one that I had thought about I couldn't do. But this one I was able to do. I just had to approach all of my research in a completely different way. So for me, typically, a book takes me about 2 years, just 2.5 years, and these are historical novels. So the majority of time is spent on the research.
Yes.
Strangely, the least amount of time is the writing,
Mhm.
and editing is somewhere in the middle. But without question, the research is the main amount of time. And when I start to write, I think I've done all the research. I think, oh, I've got everything here. It's all within my reach around my desk. I can just, roll my chair a little bit here or there to get to everything that I'll need. And invariably, as I'm writing, stuff pops up where
Yes.
now I have a new question. I have to drop everything and research that.
But do you sit down like Hemingway 4 hours a day with your computer in front of you? He used to sit down with his pencils and yellow tablets, drunk or sober, for 8 hours. I mean, from 8 in the morning until 12 noon.
Well, I guess I'm sorry to say I can't drink. I mean, I can drink tea and water, but I would not be able to drink like he was able to and write the way he could. And I don't do it by the hour. I do it by the word. So when am writing, I write 1,000 words a day, which is
Okay.
just 4 pages. Yeah, it doesn't sound like much. Some days I can do that in about 4 hours. Sometimes it takes me, can take me 8 or 10 hours. And
Yeah.
if it takes me that long, I know it's not very good.
Yeah.
I
Well,
know
I
I'm
recall,
probably going to end up cutting a lot of it or throwing it out completely. But
yes,
I'll sit in this chair. I keep a notebook with my word counts because and there are days, I'll be at like 993. I just need 7 more words. And I won't stop until I get them. The thing is, you can't fix, you have to have something to be able to fix it.
right.
And so even if it isn't perfect, the process of just sitting and working your way through it, you are going to, yeah, as I sometimes say, you have to have your butt in the chair. That's all there is to it.
Yes.
That's the only way. And this is just my way of having some discipline on myself to have that 1,000 words. And my mother was a writer and her father was a writer, and they also did this. This is where I learned
Really?
it
So
was
you had mentors.
from my mother and she from her father.
Interesting. Yeah, it's helpful to know. I'm trying the word count because I've never had any training in this. I've just done it. I started out as a journalist. And I find it interesting when people say do word count. And so I can crank out a lot. And I've always told people when you're writing, you're not trying to write the perfect sentence or paragraph. It's in the editing that you get to do
Yeah,
that. I said, just put down your ideas and then go back in and work with them later. Get it down, get
exactly.
the story down.
Yeah, I completely agree with you.
But the word count, I think, is a very good a practice, and then the idea of you're working at it every day,
Hmm.
a certain amount of
Yeah,
time, and
and
if
I
it,
don't have to, it's funny. I don't have, when I'm doing the research, I don't limit myself. I mean, because I love it so much,
yes,
I can do that hour after hour after hour until, I mean, there does sometimes come a point where your brain turns into oatmeal and you have to, get up, walk around, get some fresh air. But I can do that for hours and hours. And then with the editing, I have a process for it, which is the first draft, I can only do about 20 pages a day because it's so bad.
Yes.
It's like you said, you put it down and then you write it down and now you've got to really make uh, form it,
Yes.
find the beauty in it, find the beautiful sentences in it. And so at the first draft, if I can do 20 pages a day, that's not very much. I usually am starting with about 440 pages for my first draft. So that's going to take a lot of days just to read through it one time.
Right.
But then by the time, I'm on like my fifth draft, I'll do 50 pages a day.
Hmm.
And right now, I'm on the last draft before I turn it in. And this one I'm reading out loud because
Yes.
you sure catch a lot of stuff when you listen to it, when you
Yes, I
hear it.
agree. Mhm. Yeah. I know with frijoles, I think I had 680 pages. So I had to do a lot of
Yeah,
cutting to get it down to, I think I was 319 or something with, all the quotes and everything else and the accessible accessory materials at the back of the book. So it's an interesting process. And the next book that I did, I just cranked it out. It was a little book. And then the last one I did, I wanted to keep it tight and short so that it wasn't unwieldy.
hmm
And I was happy that I was able to do that. But I think for a lot of young writers, uh, there is a discipline to be sought, and I think the page count is a very effective one. And is used in different writing, boot camps and stuff like that that
right.
can help people do that. So, what are your next themes that you're going to be working on?
So the new book, another historical novel, actually most of it takes place here in Los Angeles in 1870-71. And this three women, all based on real women who came here at that time. And Los Angeles was just a tiny, dinky, really dinky
Yes.
little pueblo of about 5,000 people. Of those 5,000, there were 180 Chinese. Of those 180, 34 of them were women.
Wow.
And so I think about what it was like for those 34 women. And as I said, this is, again, sort of based on the true stories of three real women who were here at that time.
And give me the year again or the
It's
decade.
1870-71.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yes.
Yeah. So, I think there's some of the themes that are in all of my books. Women's friendship, the support that we get from women when we're in very difficult circumstances, um, endurance, persistence, triumph. Women. We were talking earlier about women's equality around equity equality around the world and how far we still have to go and the setbacks and things that we have. But I think we're all today, we stand on the shoulders and on of the women who came before us.
Absolutely.
And again, their sort of their persistence, their endurance, their courage, um, when they had, were in really difficult circumstances and often alone. And so, these are themes I keep coming back to. I guess, part of it is, and it says on my website, but, that I've been inspired by stories about women that have been lost, forgotten, deliberately covered up. And we still don't really learn as much about women's history as
No,
we should.
no.
It's still very much his story, history,
Mhm.
and not her story. And so I, women were there every step of the way. And so why not
Absolutely.
find their stories?
Yes. and we can take nourishment from
Ex-
those, let's say, ancients and elders and our contemporary women that are stepping up and stepping out and accomplishing a great deal. I think about Justice Joan Dempsey Klein, and I remember back in the 70s, her saying, we've got to keep looking at the Supreme Court. You've got to vote Democratic to save the Supreme Court.
Mhm.
Nobody really paid attention. And look
Mhm.
what happened, 50 years or plus
Yeah.
later. So it's very interesting. We've had visionaries and we've had the pioneers, and we've certainly known many of them ourselves. And it is nourishing. It is empowering. It is love-filled and joy-filled to have these relationships and to have one another that, we can share with and learn from,
Mhm.
and support. So it is exciting. I love the process, and I know that it's going to be women that will arrest us from the challenges that we're going through now in this country and across the world, because we are forming a more universal bond, a more global bond between women, and a greater deal of empathy as well for women who are not as fortunate as we are in this country.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think there's a something to be said for as American women, that we still really need to be educated in a lot of ways about what life is like for women in other cultures and other societies and countries. But that we can, we need to help ourselves when we need to help ourselves, but we can also, I think, support and inspire other women in much more difficult circumstances than we find ourselves.
Yes, and we have to be grateful for what we do have,
Mhm.
and also retrieve what we've lost.
Right.
Yeah, retrieve what we've lost. Yes. Well, it's exciting to speak with you, Lisa, and I honor your work. I loved Lady Tang. I've enjoyed the books that I've read of yours, by the way. And I love the Lady Tang because there's so much wisdom and richness there. And we have our own version of the foot binding in this country, so we can overcome that too, and move forward into a new era where we fulfill our highest and greatest hopes as women and have that available to all people, not only here, but across the globe.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Yolanda, for having me. This has been terrific. I hope we get to do it again one of these days.
We will do it again, Lisa. We'll have to do it every time there's a book out because you're wonderful to share your world with us, and that we can learn from. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
And to the audience, thank you for listening. I hope you will tune in next month for my interview with uh, journalist and entrepreneur Frank Cruz. It'll be an interesting conversation. Thanks so much for joining. Have a very blessed holiday season filled with love and hope and peace. God bless.